Hey everybody, what's going on? Slick D Gamer, Scott W. Perry here, and I'd like to welcome you to the first edition of a series I like to call Play Favorites, where I'm just going to list some favorite games with a specific topic, genre at hand. And I thought to start, I'm going to pick something that I don't see a lot of other gamers cover and don't really look at too much. I think a lot of people, they go for like Mario, Zelda, and while they're great and everything, and I love them, nobody really gives some sports titles recognition. And I recommend for anybody, if they want to start a retro gaming collection, that sports titles are probably the best to start with because they're so cheap, because a lot of them come out yearly. We've had long-going series and franchises, and a lot of them are still fun to play. I kind of like the simplicity of them. You know, nowadays, and you get games where you have so many modes and so many ways to try to get things going. And while I like the realism, a lot of the games back in the old days had that same feeling. Now for this, I'm only going to games up until 1995. So this is Nintendo, Genesis, Super Nintendo, Game Boy, anything leading up until Sega CD. PlayStation is not included, which was tough because there were some PlayStation games I did like. So this is not really a countdown. This is just some of my favorites. Now, there are a couple that I do like. I'm going to mention, even though I don't consider them sports titles, they technically are. So I'm going to start with them off the bat. The first one, of course, is everybody's favorite, and I preferred this version, NBA Jam. And I preferred the Super Nintendo version over everything because of the graphics and the way it looked. This, in the arcades, was a very fun game. And I'm not a huge basketball fan, but this was so much fun to do, so much fun to play. And for Super Nintendo, the graphics still hold up to this day. I still have a lot of fun playing with it. I always play as the Knicks. Unfortunately, I am a long-suffering Knicks fan. But they were good back in the 90s with Ewing and Starks. Big disappointment that Michael Jordan was not in the game. However, the way the game plays, a lot of fun. Always awesome to play with a friend. I do prefer the arcade, of course. I'm not getting the arcade one up for it, although I thought about it. But this is, to me, the second best experience. The Sega CD version is also good as well, but I do prefer the Super Nintendo. Another one that I love that has more of an arcade feel, but is a classic, and I still play a lot to this day, is the original Blades of Steel for the Nintendo Entertainment System from Konami. This and Double Dribble, both arcade ports, but I actually prefer this version over the arcade. Reason why, I just think it's a ton of fun to play. I love the back and forth of it. It is challenging with the 3 levels. You could score goals easily, and of course, everybody played it for the fights. The fights were so much fun to play and so great. I mean, it's funny in a game like hockey, you get rewarded for winning the fight. So if you win the fight, the loser goes into the penalty box, and you have a power play for a short time. 8 teams in it, you play a tournament, nice cutscenes. One added element I like is that for one of the periods, one of the intermissions, you can actually play about 10 seconds of Gradius. Konami did a great job just promoting other games and really having fun with it. Not realistic, but Blades of Steel for me, one of my favorite games on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and yours as well. Now, getting to more realistic games, one game that absolutely floored me when it came out was World Series Baseball for Genesis. And this was in 1994 when it came out during the strike season. So for a lot of baseball fans who didn't have a finished season, we turned to this to finish it off. Had the roster from it, had everything that you needed for it. But what really floored a lot of people was when the first game with licensed players came out, RBI Baseball, about 7 years earlier, I believe, 1987, or 1988, one of the 2 years, I forget. Everybody looked like chubby white guys. No stats were really, nobody was really different from another. I mean, some of the players were faster, some hit more, but you couldn't really tell the difference between player to player. In this game, you could, and in this game, the stadium's looks were unbelievable. You saw the Green Monster, you had to hit against it. Yankee Stadium was there, Wrigley Field, all the vines, it was there. It was the first game that really presented it, and it looked fantastic. Playing a full season in this, I did it with the Yankees. I won. I was very happy when I did. And even then, you could play up to, it was the first time I remember playing a full season with real players. I know a couple of games might have done beforehand, but this was the one I had the most fun with, for sure. So this is one I definitely recommend in terms of a retro sports title, in terms of realistic sports. This next one on my list is one that a lot of people prefer the predecessor on Genesis. And for me, I like this specifically because of the teams that are in it. The gameplay was better. And for some reason, I preferred it on this system over the other, even though it was more known for the other system. But this is Bulls versus Blazers in the NBA playoffs for Super Nintendo. Now, the reason why I prefer this one, the Super Nintendo version, over the Genesis is I just thought the graphics were better. And I just thought the gameplay was better with more buttons, because Super Nintendo, you had 6 buttons. Genesis, yeah, you had 6 eventually, but you started out with 3. And when you played Bulls versus Lakers, a game I do love, you only had the 3 buttons. So it got a little, it was a little simplistic, but you could do a lot more in this one, I felt. The teams were well represented. Again, Knicks were done very, very well. And at the time, this was a game breaker in terms of presentation. It looked like an actual ESPN sports presentation. As a matter of fact, if you look right here, ESAN, EASN, I'm sorry. ESPN sued the hell out of Electronic Arts at the time. So that's why EASN became EA Sports to this day. That's a big reason why. And I believe this was the last game to come out under that moniker, and they started with EA Sports not too long ago. But I mean, EA became the standard bearer in games. The NBA games series kind of sucks now. 2K took it over, but at the time, they were awesome. And I would fully recommend this one out of all of them. All right, the next one is a couple. I'm a huge hockey fan, of course, and you can't get any better than the NHL series. If you look over here, I have all the NHL series in my arsenal, but there's one missing from my shelf. And this is the one that's one of my favorites. And the reason why I picked this one, it's NHL 95. Now, everybody says NHL 94 is the better game, and I'll get to that in a second. But for Genesis, this is my favorite because this has the cup-winning team of the New York Rangers of 1994, my favorite team. And it was the first one that you could play a full season. It was the first game where when you played, you can have trades. You had playoffs. They did everything accurate. And even at the end of the season, nice little touch, they had the awards and they had the finalists. And then they picked the winner out of the finalists. I thought that was great. I thought that was a nice touch. I thought it really was spectacular. It really was a fun game to play. I enjoyed the hell out of this. Now, there is a problem in terms of playing this game because when the game was released, there was a specific battery in it where you can save a season that got fried about a few weeks afterwards on most of the copies. So if you can find a copy today, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to save it. That's one of the problems with this game. But I still love playing it on a regular Genesis to this day. If you have an emulator, I normally don't recommend emulators, but if you ever want to play a season with it, make sure you have the real game before you do so, all right? But with that said, while you can't save your season on NHL 95, put that over here, you can save it on your Sega CD with NHL 94. Now, this one, this is one of my favorite Sega CD games, and I actually played it recently. I still remembered everything. I still remembered how to do the deke, how to do the one-timer, how to do everything. This really solidified EA on the map. As you could look, EA Sports right there. We saw ESAN, now EA Sports. So what I liked about this, there was some video in it. Video presentation was great. You had Ron Barr speaking for EA Sports. Now, in the regular 94 game, you had just his text. In this game, you actually hear him. You actually hear his speech, and he runs down the team and has a good breakdown. There's also a nice presentation when you win the cup. There's a nice playoff atmosphere. The gameplay is great. It's spot on. I absolutely love this. And again, the Rangers are a good team in this, but you can play anybody. You can play any team. The players were well represented. You had Gretzky, Lemieux, Messier. You even had stats in here. They had stats of everybody at the time, and you can look at throughout all their years. That was unheard of back in 1995 when this came out. And this was a game that I currently still play to this day and love. So with that said, those are some of the games I recommend. And these were great retro sports titles. But there's one overall that I played above everything else. One that I still play to this day. One that is remembered fondly, remembered greatly by everybody. And I see a whole team still putting out updates and emulators today. And it is a game that I had many fits, many days playing, and I actually beat the game with every single team in it, even the ones I hated. But this to me is the greatest retro sports game of all. Tecmo Super Bowl for the regular Nintendo. Now, Tecmo Bowl, the original Tecmo Bowl has been in a lot. It's on the NES Classic. It's on Nintendo Switch, and the reason why that is because of the player license. And I know that's one reason why you don't see this one a lot as much. But this pretty much took Tecmo Bowl and just amplified it by 1,000. This was the first time I can remember you could play a full season on it. It was the 1991 NFL season, game by game, still arcadey, but you had all the players, you had all the stats, and just getting to the Super Bowl was great. You can skip the whole season, go right to the playoffs. I always played as the Giants. Lawrence Taylor was a beast. Bo Jackson was still a beast. The 49ers were hard as hell to beat. Every team was great in it. Barry Sanders was well, he was a Lion in it, of course, Detroit Lions, but he was an actual Lion. Like, you couldn't stop these guys, and it was very accurate. But I still have fun to this day. So, and this definitely is my favorite retro sports game of all time. So those are just a few of my favorites in terms of retro sports titles. And I strongly recommend, if you want to start a collection, I would start with those games off the bat. They're very cheap, very affordable, and it's a great way to really build up your collection for sure. All right. For me, the other reason why I like it is you can play a game for 20 minutes, turn it off, and you're done. And that's it. And that's part of the beauty of it. But definitely games I would recommend for sure. All right, and those are some of my play favorites. I'm Slick D, Scott W. Perry, signing off. Have a good one. Take care.